The evening was electric. I stood on the rooftop of a glittering skyscraper, the city lights twinkling below like stars fallen to earth. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and the low murmur of conversation. Laughter erupted periodically, punctuating the night, and I was determined to enjoy it. After all, it was a high-profile gala, filled with influential guests and the promise of excitement. As I scanned the crowd, my gaze landed on Jennifer. She was radiant in her emerald green dress, her laughter ringing out as she chatted animatedly with a group of people. Among them was Luke, the charming director who had been making waves in Hollywood. He was effortlessly charismatic, leaning in close, making her laugh harder than anyone else could. My stomach tightened as I noticed the way her eyes sparkled around him. "Hey, Brian, come join us," Jennifer called out, waving me over. I forced a smile and walked to their circle, trying to shake off the creeping sense of unease. "Luke, this is my husband, Brian," Jennifer introduced me, her voice bright. "Nice to meet you," Luke said, extending his hand, a confident grin on his face. I shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, and couldn't help but admire his magnetism. We engaged in small talk, but my focus was on Jennifer. She seemed completely entranced by Luke. As they discussed his latest film project, I felt a knot tightening in my chest. I couldn't pinpoint why, but something about their chemistry unsettled me. As the night wore on, I found myself retreating to the bar, needing a moment to breathe. I ordered a whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the glass as I contemplated the evening's festivities. I wanted to push aside the nagging feeling in my gut, but it lingered like a dark cloud. In the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle changes in Jennifer. She started coming home late more often, claiming she was working on a project with her colleagues. When I would ask about her day, she'd often deflect, her phone buzzing with messages she'd quickly silence. I began to wonder if there was more to her late nights than just work. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed her phone while she was in the shower, and as I scrolled through her messages, my heart sank. There, in bright letters, were flirty exchanges with Luke. Each message felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. My mind raced. How could she? I was torn between anger and despair. Instead of confronting her, I decided on a different course of action. I would make her see the truth, not just about her relationship with Luke but about the pain she was causing me. I began to plan an elaborate revenge. I arranged a massive premiere for a film I had no connection to, and invited all the important figures in the industry, including Jennifer and Luke. I envisioned the moment they would walk into the theater, their smiles wide, unaware of what was to come. I made sure to include footage that would expose their secret romance, an unveiling of their affair for the world to see. As the premiere night approached, excitement bubbled within me. I wasn't just going to expose their relationship, I was going to do it in a way that would leave them reeling. The night of the gala arrived, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Guests filled the lavish venue, sipping champagne and mingling, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I stood at the back of the room, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Finally, the lights dimmed, and the screen flickered to life. As the first scenes began to roll, I watched Jennifer and Luke seated together in the front row, their expressions slowly shifting from excitement to confusion. I leaned forward, a grin creeping onto my face as I saw the realization dawn on them. The first intimate scene flashed across the screen, and I could feel the atmosphere shift. Gasps filled the room, the whispers growing louder. I was finally ready to reveal the truth, and there was no turning back now. The tension in the room was palpable as the footage continued to play. I could feel the weight of every gaze in the theater, all directed at Jennifer and Luke. I leaned back in my seat, a mix of satisfaction and dread swirling within me. This was my moment, a reckoning that was long overdue. Jennifer's face went from shock to horror, and I caught a glimpse of her hand tightening around the armrest, her knuckles turning white. Luke shifted uncomfortably beside her, his confident demeanor evaporating like mist in the morning sun. It was almost poetic, watching their world collapse in front of an audience. As the clips rolled on, the scenes showcased not just their stolen moments but the laughter, the whispers, and the chemistry they thought they had hidden. I could hear gasps from the audience, their shock echoing through the grand hall. Friends and colleagues murmured among themselves, some looking at Jennifer with pity, others with judgment. Finally, the screen went dark, and the room fell silent. I stood up, my heart racing. The time had come to address the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. What you just witnessed is the truth behind the facade. My wife, Jennifer, and the esteemed director, Luke, have been carrying on an affair while deceiving those around them. Gasps erupted. I scanned the room, and I could see familiar faces filled with disbelief. I focused on Jennifer, whose eyes were now brimming with tears. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, utterly exposed. "What the hell, Brian?" she finally managed to spit out, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "Don't act surprised, Jennifer. You thought you could keep this a secret while I played the oblivious husband? While you flaunted your affair right under my nose?" I could feel the adrenaline surging through my veins, each word dripping with bitterness. Luke, trying to regain some composure, stood up. "Brian, this isn't the place for this. Let's talk about this privately." "Talk?" I scoffed, cutting him off. "You've had your chance to talk. To be honest. But this isn't just between us anymore." The murmurs in the audience grew louder, a mixture of gossip and shock filling the space. I felt a strange satisfaction watching them squirm, knowing they were no longer in control of the narrative. Jennifer finally stood up, wiping her tears angrily. "You think this is going to solve anything? This is just embarrassing for both of us." I felt a pang of regret but quickly shoved it aside. "You chose this, Jennifer. You chose him over me. I just wanted everyone to see who you really are." Her face contorted with emotion, and for a moment, I almost felt sympathy. But the betrayal ran too deep. As I looked around, I saw the expressions of friends who had always supported our marriage. They shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to react. Some looked sympathetic towards Jennifer, others seemed to share my outrage. "Let's go," Luke exclaimed, taking Jennifer's arm. I felt a surge of rage at the sight of them together. Even in this moment of crisis. "No," I shouted, stepping forward. "You don't get to run away from this. Not now." The audience was glued to us, a captivated audience to our private tragedy. I felt exposed yet empowered, the world finally bearing witness to the truth. "What's next?" I asked, my voice steady. "Do you plan to keep lying to yourself? To him? Or will you finally face the consequences of your actions?" Jennifer's face twisted with anguish, and I could see the weight of realization crash over her. Luke remained quiet, clearly uncertain of what to do. "Enough," I declared, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. "You wanted excitement? This is it. The world can see how the story ends." As Jennifer stood there, the tears streaming down her face, I knew there was no going back. The truth had been laid bare, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The room was thick with tension as the echoes of my words faded. I watched as Jennifer and Luke stood frozen, their world turned upside down in an instant. The stunned silence was almost deafening, broken only by a few hushed whispers from the audience, grappling with the shocking revelation. I could see Jennifer's facade crumbling. She took a shaky breath, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. But there was no escaping now, everyone knew. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized this wasn't just about revenge, it was about exposing a truth that had been gnawing at me for far too long. "Brian, this isn't fair," Jennifer finally exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. "You didn't have to do this in front of everyone." "Fair?" I shot back, my anger boiling over. "What's fair is you lying to me, lying to everyone. You think you can just waltz around with him while I'm left in the dark?" Luke attempted to intervene, stepping between us. "Let's just talk about this privately. We can figure it out without all these people watching." "Figure what out?" I snapped. "You think this is just going to go away? You both wanted the excitement of an affair. And now you have the thrill of being exposed. Enjoy the show." The audience shifted uneasily, their eyes glued to us. Some had already begun to pull out their phones, capturing the chaos unfolding before them. I could almost hear the clicks of social media posts being drafted, headlines taking shape. This was more than just a personal betrayal, it was a spectacle, and I was ready to own it. Jennifer's expression morphed into one of disbelief. "You're making this worse, Brian. This isn't who you are." "No," I retorted, my voice cold. "This is who I've become because of you. You made me this way." With that, I turned my back on them, feeling the weight of the moment wash over me. I could feel the stares of the audience like daggers in my back, each one a reminder of my own heartache and betrayal. As I walked away, I heard Jennifer call my name, desperation lacing her voice. "Brian, please, don't walk away from me." I paused but didn't turn around. I couldn't bear to look at her, not when the image of her laughing with Luke replayed in my mind like a haunting melody. I knew that if I faced her now, I might crumble under the weight of it all. Instead, I made my way toward the exit, a mix of adrenaline and sorrow coursing through me. Outside, the cool night air hit me like a splash of cold water. I leaned against the wall, taking a moment to collect myself. The sounds of the gala faded behind me, and for the first time since the revelation, I felt a flicker of clarity. I had exposed the truth, but at what cost? As I stood there, the reality of what I had done settled in. My plan had worked, but it felt hollow. Revenge didn't bring back the love I thought we had. It only left me with a bitter taste in my mouth and a heart that felt heavier than before. I needed to confront my feelings, to sort through the chaos that had become my life. In that moment of solitude, I knew I had a choice. I could let this consume me, or I could take a step forward and reclaim my life. Suddenly, a voice broke through my thoughts. Brian, it was one of my friends from the industry. Mark, rushing toward me. What just happened in there? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. You saw it all, didn't you? Yeah, but I didn't think. I had no idea things were this bad between you two. Neither did I admitted, the weight of my emotions spilling over. I thought we had a marriage. I thought we were happy. Mark looked at me with sympathy. I'm sorry, man, you deserve better than this. You know that, right? I nodded, grateful for his support. I just never expected it to end like this. In front of everyone. Sometimes the truth comes out in the most unexpected ways, he said gently. You've got to take care of yourself now. As I stood there, grappling with the reality of my shattered marriage, I realized that moving on wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever lay ahead. It was time to reclaim my story. This was just the beginning. The aftermath of the gala weighed heavily on me. I returned home that night, the silence in the house amplifying my thoughts. Each creak of the floorboards echoed in the emptiness, reminding me of the life that had just imploded. I had confronted Jennifer and Luke publicly, but now it was time to confront my own feelings. I stood in the living room, staring at the framed photos of happier times. There we were, smiling at various events, our love seemingly unshakable. It felt surreal to think how quickly everything had changed. I grabbed one of the frames, my fingers brushing against the glass. In that moment, I was overcome with anger, grief, and a sense of betrayal that felt almost suffocating. I plopped down on the couch, the weight of it all crashing down. I could hear my phone buzzing with messages, notifications flooding in from friends and acquaintances, most likely expressing their shock or concern. I ignored them. I wasn't ready to deal with anyone just yet. Suddenly, the front door creaked open, and I heard her voice. Brian? It was Jennifer, her tone hesitant. I clenched my jaw, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to tell her to leave, but another part wanted to hear her side of the story. I took a deep breath and composed myself. I'm here. She stepped into the living room, looking disheveled and raw. Her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were puffy from crying. I can't believe you did that, she said, her voice trembling. I can't believe you've been lying to me, I shot back, the hurt spilling out. You thought you could have it both ways. Your husband at home and your fling on the side? Brian, please. She moved closer, desperation in her eyes. I never meant for it to get to this point. I thought I could handle it. Handle what? Your feelings for him? I retorted, my anger flaring. You didn't think about how this would affect me, did you? I was confused. She cried, her voice breaking. Luke made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I thought I could sort it out without hurting you. Sort it out? I echoed, incredulous. You don't get to decide when to tell me the truth. You kept it hidden until it exploded in front of everyone. She looked down, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her guilt was too much to bear. I was scared, Brian. Scared of losing you, scared of losing everything. Then why didn't you talk to me? We could have worked through it. My voice softened and I felt a flicker of sadness for what we had lost. I didn't know how, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. I thought I could find a way to feel good again without it hurting you. But I was wrong. The room fell silent as we both grappled with the reality of the situation. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow coursing through me. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to forgive her, but another part was too hurt to move forward. I don't know if I can forgive you, Jennifer, I finally said, my voice low. You've shattered my trust. I understand, she whispered, her eyes pleading. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you, Brian. Love. The word hung in the air like a ghost of what it once meant. You have a funny way of showing it, I replied, bitterness creeping into my tone. I know, and I regret it every day, she said, stepping closer. Can we just try to talk this out? I want to understand how we got here. I want to fix this. I shook my head, the hurt still fresh. You've broken something that might not be fixable. You can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. Jennifer's face crumpled, and I felt a pang of sympathy. I know I can't, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. I want to fight for us. I took a step back, overwhelmed. Maybe you should have thought of that before you started lying to me. Her expression shifted, from despair to determination. Then let me prove it to you. I'll do whatever it takes to regain your trust. Trust is earned, Jennifer. And right now, I don't even know where to begin, I replied, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. Jennifer nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. Then let's start with honesty. No more lies. No more secrets. As I looked into her eyes, I felt the conflict raging within me. Could I really let her back in? Did I want to? The road ahead felt daunting, but I also knew that if we were going to move forward, it had to start with a conversation. A real, raw conversation. Okay, I finally said, my heart heavy. But it won't be easy. You have to understand that. I will, she promised, her voice firm. I'll fight for us, Brian. I won't give up. And in that moment, I realized we were standing on the edge of a precipice with a choice to make. Whether we could find a way back from this, or whether it was time to let go, was still uncertain. But at least we were finally facing each other, ready to confront the truth together. The days that followed the gala felt like a blur. Each morning I woke up to the haunting memories of that night, the images of Jennifer and Luke flashing through my mind. Yet, I knew I had to confront this, to dig deeper into the mess we had created together. Jennifer and I agreed to meet in our favorite coffee shop, neutral ground where we had once shared countless laughs and dreams. I arrived early, ordering a black coffee and taking a seat by the window, the sun pouring in like a warm embrace. But the warmth didn't reach my heart, it felt cold and heavy instead. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Her usual vibrancy was replaced by a weariness that made her look older, more fragile. She approached the table cautiously, her expression a mix of hope and trepidation. Hey, she said softly, sliding into the chair across from me. Hey, I replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. I took a sip of my coffee, hoping it would give me the strength to start the conversation we both needed. I'm glad we're doing this, she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. I've been thinking a lot about everything. Me too, I admitted, my heart racing. But I need you to be completely honest with me. Jennifer, no more sugarcoating. I want to know why this happened. She nodded, her expression serious. I understand. I guess it started with feeling lost. I thought I was being supportive of your career, but I felt like I was losing myself in the process. I thought I was doing what was best for us, but it was selfish. Selfish how? I pressed, trying to keep my tone even. I was caught up in the excitement of it all, she admitted, her voice cracking. Luke made me feel desired. Alive. But I see now that it was a fantasy, a distraction from the reality of our marriage. I leaned back in my chair, processing her words. And you thought lying to me was the answer? No, I didn't think it would go that far, she protested, tears forming in her eyes. I thought I could manage it without hurting you. I was wrong. I see that now. Do you love him? The question hung between us, sharp and jagged. She hesitated, looking down at her hands. I thought I did, but it was never real. It was infatuation, the thrill of something new and exciting. But I love you, Brian. You're my partner, my best friend. I swallowed hard, the weight of her admission settling heavily on my chest. Then why didn't you come to me when you started feeling this way? We could have worked through it together. I was scared, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Scared of losing you, scared of facing the truth. I thought I could keep it separate. I thought it wouldn't hurt you. Quote. Clearly, that didn't work out, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. And now we're here, picking up the pieces. I know, she replied, her eyes pleading. But I want to try. I want to make this right. I don't want to lose you. As I looked into her eyes, I could see the sincerity behind her words. but a part of me still felt like a wounded animal, ready to flee at the slightest hint of danger. What does making this right even look like? I asked, my voice heavy with doubt. I'm willing to go to therapy, to work through my feelings, she offered earnestly. I want us to communicate better. I want to rebuild the trust that's been shattered. But I need your help too. My help? I echoed, a mix of anger and confusion rising within me. You were the one who broke our trust. Why should I have to help you? Because I don't want to lose the best thing I've ever had, she replied, her voice breaking. I know I messed up, but I'm willing to fight for us. Please, can't we at least try? Her vulnerability stirred something deep within me. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the pain of betrayal. This won't be easy, Jennifer. I'm not sure if I can just forgive and forget. I don't expect you to, she said softly. I know it will take time. But I promise to be honest with you, to put in the work. I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve. As I sat there, weighing her words, I realized that the path forward wouldn't be simple. We were at a crossroads, and both of us had to be willing to navigate the rough terrain ahead. I need to think about this, I finally said, my voice steady but uncertain. I can't promise anything right now, but I'm willing to consider it. Thank you, she whispered, her relief evident. That's all I ask. I just want the chance to prove that I can change. As we sat in the cozy coffee shop, the weight of our conversation hung heavily in the air. I knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to heal. But only time would tell if we could truly overcome this together. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. Jennifer and I agreed to start attending therapy together, hoping to navigate the wreckage of our relationship with the help of a professional. I felt a mix of anticipation and dread as our first session approached. When we arrived at the therapist's office, a cozy space filled with soft lighting and comfortable furniture, I could sense Jennifer's nervous energy. She glanced around, biting her lip as we settled into the plush chairs across from Dr. Miller, our therapist. Thank you both for coming in today, Dr. Miller began, her voice soothing and calm. I know this can be a difficult process, but it's a brave step to take. Thank you for having us, I replied, feeling a knot of tension in my stomach. Jennifer nodded, her fingers intertwined in her lap. We're ready to start working on things. Dr. Miller smiled encouragingly. Great. Let's begin by discussing what brought you here. Jennifer, would you like to start? Taking a deep breath, Jennifer glanced at me, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and uncertainty. I know I hurt Brian deeply by being unfaithful. I didn't think it would go this far, and I regret it every day. I want to understand why I made those choices and how to move forward. I watched her, feeling a mix of anger and compassion. Part of me wanted to scream about the pain she caused, but I also recognized her willingness to confront the issue head-on. Dr. Miller nodded, encouraging her to continue. That's a good start. Brian, how do you feel about what Jennifer has shared? I shifted in my seat, feeling the weight of her gaze on me. I feel betrayed and hurt. I trusted her completely, and that trust was shattered. It's difficult to even look at her sometimes without feeling that pain all over again. Dr. Miller turned to me. It's important to express those feelings. Can you elaborate on how the betrayal has affected you? I took a moment to gather my thoughts. It's made me question everything, our relationship, our history. I keep replaying memories in my mind, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. I feel like I've lost part of myself in this process. Jennifer's eyes glistened with tears, and I could see how my words affected her. I never wanted to hurt you, Brian. I was confused and scared, and I made terrible choices. I want to fix this, she said, her voice shaking. Dr. Miller interjected gently. It sounds like both of you are feeling a lot of pain and confusion. Acknowledging those feelings is the first step toward healing. Jennifer, can you tell Brian what you're willing to do to rebuild trust? I'm committed to being completely transparent, Jennifer replied, her voice steadying. I'll share my feelings openly, and I'm ready to put in the work. I'll go to individual therapy too, to understand my own actions better. Good, Dr. Miller said, nodding. Brian, how does that make you feel? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. It's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't erase what happened. Trust takes time to rebuild. I understand that, Jennifer said quickly. I'm willing to be patient. I want to show you that I can change. Dr. Miller smiled. It's crucial that you both communicate openly and honestly. Trust can be rebuilt, but it will require effort from both sides. Brian, what do you need from Jennifer to start feeling more secure in the relationship again? I hesitated, contemplating her question. I need to see that she's committed to making this work, not just saying the right things, but really putting in the effort. I need her to be present and honest, even when it's uncomfortable. That's fair, Dr. Miller affirmed. And Jennifer, how can you demonstrate that commitment to Brian? I can set boundaries with Luke and be clear about my priorities, she replied. I can also make sure Brian feels included in my life again, to show him that he is my priority. As we continued to discuss our feelings and needs, I could feel the tension in the room gradually ease. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start, an opportunity to confront the pain and uncertainty together. After the session ended, Jennifer and I walked out into the bustling street, the chaos of the city swirling around us. I could feel her presence beside me, a reminder of the complicated history we shared. I think it went well, she said tentatively, glancing at me. Do you feel that way? Yeah, it was a start, I admitted, my mind still racing with the conversation. But we have a long way to go. She nodded, her expression earnest. I'm willing to fight for us, Brian. I hope you see that. I see your commitment, I replied cautiously. But it's going to take time for me to trust again. I'm not ready to make promises yet. Take all the time you need, she said, her voice filled with understanding. I just want you to know I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. As we walked side by side, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time, it felt like we were both ready to face it together. In the weeks that followed, Jennifer and I continued our therapy sessions. Each meeting felt like stepping onto a battleground, emotions were raw, and the stakes were high. Yet, slowly, we began to peel back the layers of hurt and misunderstanding that had built up over time. Our sessions became a safe space where we could express our fears and frustrations. Dr. Miller guided us through exercises designed to improve our communication, emphasizing the importance of listening as much as speaking. One afternoon, as we sat in the familiar office, Dr. Miller encouraged us to share a specific memory that represented our relationship at its best. Brian, would you like to go first? She asked, her voice warm and inviting. I paused, taking a moment to reflect. One of my favorite memories is our trip to the coast 2 summers ago. We spent the entire day at the beach, just talking and laughing. I remember watching the sunset and thinking how lucky I was to have her by my side. It felt like we were invincible. Jennifer smiled, her eyes glistening. That was one of my favorite days too. I felt so connected to you, like nothing else mattered in that moment. Dr. Miller nodded. That's a beautiful memory. What do you think made that day so special? I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warmth of that memory wash over me. We were just present with each other. No distractions, no outside pressures. Just us. Can you try to recreate that feeling? Dr. Miller asked. What would it take to bring that level of connection back into your relationship? I glanced at Jennifer, her gaze intent and hopeful. I think we need to prioritize time together, away from everything else. Maybe plan some outings, just the two of us, to reconnect. I'd love that, Jennifer replied eagerly. I want to make those memories again, to show you how much you mean to me. As we discussed our goals for rebuilding our relationship, I felt a sense of purpose emerging within me. It was still early, but I was beginning to see the possibility of healing, of rebuilding what had been broken. Outside of therapy, we started to implement small changes in our daily lives. We set aside date nights, a chance to enjoy each other's company without the distractions of work or the outside world. Some nights we cooked dinner together, sharing laughs and playful banter. Other nights, we ventured out to explore new restaurants or take long walks through the city. One evening, as we strolled through a park, the sun setting behind us, I felt a warmth blooming in my chest. We talked about our dreams and aspirations, the laughter coming easily, as if the shadows of the past were finally starting to fade. Do you remember how we used to dream about traveling the world? Jennifer asked, her eyes sparkling. We always said we'd go to Italy one day. I chuckled, nodding. Yeah, we talked about spending a month in Tuscany, just eating pasta and sipping wine. Let's make that happen, she said, her voice filled with excitement. Let's start planning our dream trip. The idea ignited something inside me. I'd like that, I replied, feeling a surge of hope. It would be a great way to celebrate our progress. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself looking forward to our time together. The laughter returned, and so did the ease we once had in our relationship. Though the wounds were still tender, the shared moments of joy began to build a foundation for healing. However, there were still hard days, moments when doubt would creep in, reminding me of the pain Jennifer had caused. During one particularly challenging session, I found myself struggling to voice my concerns. Sometimes I feel like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop, I admitted, my voice wavering. I want to trust you, but there's this fear that it could all fall apart again. Jennifer reached for my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. I understand that fear, Brian. I feel it too, but I want to show you every day that I'm committed to us. I don't want to lose you again. Dr. Miller nodded. It's completely normal to feel that way, especially after a betrayal. Trust is rebuilt slowly, and it's okay to acknowledge those fears as part of the healing process. As we talked through those feelings, I realized that confronting my fears head-on was essential to moving forward. It was a part of the journey, a necessary step toward rebuilding our relationship on a stronger foundation. One evening, after a particularly insightful therapy session, I found myself lying in bed, reflecting on everything we had been through. I turned to Jennifer, who was already awake, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. "What are you thinking about?" I asked softly. She turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "I was just reflecting on how far we've come. It's not easy, but I feel like we're really trying to understand each other again." "I feel it too," I replied, my heart swelling with a mix of hope and caution. "There's still a long way to go, but I'm willing to keep working at it." She smiled, reaching out to intertwine her fingers with mine. "Me too. I believe we can get through this. I want to fight for our future together." As I lay there, feeling the warmth of her hand in mine, I realized that perhaps we could find our way back to each other. The road ahead would be long, filled with ups and downs, but for the first time in a while, I felt a glimmer of hope that we could heal and rebuild, together. As the weeks turned into months, our therapy sessions became a cornerstone of our healing process. Jennifer and I continued to navigate our way through the aftermath of her betrayal, learning to communicate more openly and honestly. The laughter we once shared was beginning to resurface, but lurking beneath the surface was an undeniable tension, a test of our commitment to each other. One day, Jennifer came home from work, her face a mix of excitement and anxiety. "Brian, you won't believe who called me today," she said, her eyes wide. I looked up from the couch, curious. "Who?" "Luke," she replied, the name hanging in the air like a dark cloud. "He wants to meet." My stomach dropped. "What does he want?" She took a deep breath, clearly conflicted. "He said he wants to clear the air and discuss what happened. He thinks it's important for us to have closure." "Closure?" I echoed, incredulous. "Why would you want to meet him? What's the point?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice shaky. "Part of me thinks it could help us move forward. To put that chapter behind us. But I understand if you don't want me to go." I felt my heart racing, a surge of anger mixed with a deep sense of betrayal. "You think meeting him will help? You really believe that talking to the guy you cheated on me with will make things better?" Jennifer looked down, guilt washing over her face. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Brian. I thought maybe it could bring some clarity." "Clarity?" I snapped, standing up. "The only clarity I need is that you're committed to me and to this relationship. Meeting with him feels like opening a wound that's barely starting to heal." "I understand how you feel," she said softly, her eyes pleading. "But I want to be honest about my past, to confront it instead of hiding from it. I want to prove to you that I'm serious about making this work." I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. "What if it backfires? What if you see him and those feelings come rushing back?" She reached for my hand, her grip firm yet gentle. "I promise you, Brian, I've moved on from that. I love you, and I want to prove that to you. But I understand if you can't accept this." I stood there, torn between my desire to trust her and my fear of losing her all over again. "This is a huge test for us," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can handle it." "I get that," she replied, her voice steady. "But maybe we need to face it together. I won't let him sway me. My heart is with you, and I want you to know that." After a long silence, I finally sighed, feeling the weight of the decision settle heavily on my shoulders. "If you really think it'll help, then go. But I need you to promise me something." "What?" she asked, her eyes wide with concern. "Promise me you'll be completely honest about what happens. No hiding anything. If this is going to work, I need full transparency." "I promise," she said, her expression earnest. "I won't keep anything from you." The following day, I watched as Jennifer prepared to meet Luke, her demeanor a mix of nerves and determination. I wanted to be supportive, to trust her, but doubt gnawed at my insides. As she walked out the door, I felt a knot in my stomach. "Call me afterward, okay?" I said, trying to sound casual. "I will," she replied, offering me a reassuring smile. But as the door closed behind her, that smile faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. The hours dragged on, each tick of the clock echoing in my mind. I tried to distract myself with work, but the thought of their meeting consumed me. What were they talking about? Was she really ready to put that part of her life behind her? Or was it just a way for her to relive the thrill? Finally, my phone buzzed, jolting me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Jennifer. "Just finished. Can we talk?" My heart raced as I quickly typed back. "Of course. Where?" "I'll be home in 10. When she walked in, I could see the uncertainty etched across her face. My pulse quickened as I gestured for her to sit down. "How did it go?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. "It was intense," she admitted, her voice shaky. "We talked about a lot of things. I told him about our therapy sessions and how I'm committed to making things work with you." I nodded, holding my breath. "And what did he say?" She took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "He apologized for everything, for getting involved with me when I was married. He wanted to understand why it happened, but I made it clear that I love you and that's where my heart is now." I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. "And how did that make you feel?" "It was hard," she confessed. "Seeing him brought back memories, but it also made me realize how far I've come. I don't want that life anymore. I want to build a future with you." As I looked into her eyes, I saw the sincerity behind her words. Yet, the fear still lingered. "Did you feel any temptation?" "No," she said firmly, shaking her head. "I was nervous going in, but when I saw him, all I could think about was how much I love you. I want to be with you, Brian. That's my truth." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "So, what's next?" "I think we need to take this as a step forward," she said, wiping away a tear. "We're still in the process of rebuilding, but I want to move on from this chapter completely. No more distractions." "That's what I want too," I replied, my heart slowly starting to ease. "But I need time to process this." "Of course," she said, her expression softening. "I'm here for you, and I'm willing to be patient. We'll figure this out together." As we talked late into the night, sharing our fears and hopes, I felt a sense of resolve building within me. It wouldn't be easy, but perhaps this test was a necessary part of our journey, a way to confront the past and, ultimately, strengthen our bond. In that moment, I realized that healing was not just about forgetting the pain, it was about learning to navigate it together, step by step. And as long as we were committed to facing those challenges, there was hope for a brighter future. As the weeks passed since Jennifer's meeting with Luke, life began to settle into a new rhythm. We continued our therapy sessions, and I found myself cautiously optimistic about our progress. The tension that had once clouded our home began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of purpose and a commitment to healing. We had established new routines, date nights, weekend outings, and quiet evenings spent curled up on the couch watching movies. These moments became sacred, small pockets of joy that reminded us of the love we had shared long before the turmoil began. One Friday evening, we decided to take a walk through our favorite park. The air was crisp, and the trees were beginning to show their autumn colors, leaves swirling around us like nature's confetti. I took a deep breath, feeling grateful for the simple pleasure of being together. "I love this time of year," Jennifer said, her voice light as she kicked a pile of leaves. "It always feels like a fresh start." I smiled, watching her carefree spirit. "It does. It reminds me that change can be beautiful." As we strolled along the path, we talked about our plans for the future, trips we wanted to take, goals we wanted to achieve. For the first time in a long while, the conversations felt hopeful instead of heavy. But even amidst the optimism, I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey was still fragile. There were still days when I'd catch myself replaying memories of her betrayal, and the trust we were building felt like a delicate structure that could crumble at any moment. That evening, as we returned home, I could sense that Jennifer had something on her mind. She had been quiet during our walk, her brow slightly furrowed. "Everything okay?" I asked as we settled onto the couch, the warm glow of the lamp casting a soft light around us. She looked at me, taking a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about our progress and how far we've come, but I also know there are still things we need to address." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart beginning to race. I think it's important to discuss how we'll handle potential triggers in the future. She said carefully. Like, what if I run into Luke again, or if something reminds you of the past? I nodded slowly, recognizing the weight of her words. You're right, we need to have a plan. We should establish some ground rules, she suggested, her eyes earnest. Like if I do run into him, I'll call you immediately. I want you to be the first to know, no matter what. Okay, that makes sense, I replied, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. And if I start to feel uncomfortable or if the past comes creeping back, I need you to be patient with me. I might need to talk about it, even if it's awkward. Of course, she said, her voice steady. I want to be here for you, and I want us to navigate this together. As we talked through our concerns, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. We were actively acknowledging the challenges we might face, rather than pretending they didn't exist. It was a step toward healing, one that brought us closer together. Over the next few days, we made a concerted effort to communicate openly about our feelings. Whenever I sensed a hint of doubt creeping in, I'd voice my concerns instead of letting them fester. Jennifer did the same, and it was refreshing to see her willingness to be vulnerable. One evening, as we sat at the dining table sharing a homemade dinner, I decided to bring up something I had been thinking about. I've been considering the idea of a getaway. Just the two of us, somewhere we can focus on reconnecting. What do you think? Her eyes lit up. I love that idea. Where were you thinking? Maybe a cabin in the mountains? Somewhere peaceful, away from everything, I suggested. We could hike, relax by the fire, and really focus on us. I'm in, she replied, her enthusiasm infectious. That sounds perfect. I think we could both use some time to unwind and just be together. As we began to plan our trip, excitement bubbled up between us. It felt like a turning point, a chance to solidify our bond, away from the distractions of our daily lives. But even as we looked forward to our getaway, I was still aware of the fragile nature of our healing process. There were days when doubt would resurface, but each time, we met it head-on with open hearts and minds. The day of our trip finally arrived. As we loaded the car with supplies, I felt a sense of anticipation mixed with nervousness. Would this getaway truly help us heal? Could it strengthen our connection even further? When we arrived at the cabin, nestled among towering trees and blanketed in autumn leaves, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. The serenity of the place enveloped us, the air crisp and fresh, like a promise of renewal. As we settled in, I took a moment to soak in the beauty around us. The sun filtered through the trees, casting golden rays that danced on the wooden deck. It felt magical, like a fresh canvas waiting for us to paint our new beginning. Let's make the most of this, Jennifer said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I want to create beautiful memories here. Me too, I replied, my heart swelling with hope. Let's start fresh. We spent the days hiking through the vibrant fall foliage, sharing stories and laughter that felt both familiar and new. Each moment felt like a step closer to the connection we once had, and with each shared experience, I felt the barriers between us slowly dissolve. On our last night at the cabin, we built a fire on the porch, the flames flickering in the cool night air. As we sat together under the vast, starry sky, I turned to her, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. I can't remember the last time I felt this at peace, I said softly. Thank you for being here with me, for fighting for us. Jennifer smiled, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. Thank you for believing in us, Brian. I know we still have work to do, but I truly feel like we're on the right path. As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I realized that healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And while the road ahead might still be fraught with challenges, we were committed to walking it together. Hand in hand. In that moment, I felt the warmth of hope blossoming between us, igniting a renewed sense of love and possibility for our future. The weeks following our getaway at the cabin were filled with a renewed sense of connection. Jennifer and I returned to our daily routines, but everything felt different, lighter, more vibrant. We had shared an experience that deepened our bond, and it felt like we were finally beginning to emerge from the shadows of the past. But as time passed, I noticed subtle changes in Jennifer's behavior. There were moments when she seemed distracted, her laughter a bit forced. I tried to brush it off, thinking that perhaps it was just the stress of work, but the nagging feeling in my gut told me otherwise. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, I overheard her on the phone in the other room. Her voice was low and tense, and I couldn't help but strain to hear the conversation. I don't know, it's complicated, she said, her tone edged with anxiety. I care about him, but I'm committed to Brian. My heart dropped. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal as I tried to process what I was hearing. Who was she talking to? And why was she discussing our relationship with someone else? When she hung up, I couldn't hold back any longer. Who were you talking to? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Jennifer looked startled, her eyes wide. Brian, I didn't mean to. Just tell me who it was. I interrupted, my pulse quickening. It was Luke. She admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke? You're still talking to him? I could feel the heat rising in my chest. After everything we've been through? I didn't want to hide it from you, she said, her eyes pleading. He called to check in. He's trying to move on, and I was just trying to be kind. Kind? I echoed, incredulous. You think talking to him is being kind? You know how much pain he caused us. I know, she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. But it's not like that. I'm committed to you. Brian, please believe me. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling overwhelmed. How can I believe you when you're still having conversations with him? It feels like you're still tied to the past. That's not true. I want to move forward with you, she said, her voice trembling. But I didn't want to be rude or hurtful. I thought you'd understand. Understand? I shot back, my anger boiling over. Understand that you're still in contact with the man who betrayed me? No, I don't understand. Quote. Jennifer's face crumpled, and I could see the weight of my words hitting her hard. I thought I could handle it. I wanted to show him I'd moved on. But I see now that it was a mistake to even engage with him. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I felt like I was on shaky ground, and the foundation we had been building suddenly felt fragile and uncertain. What are we doing here, Jen? I asked, my voice softer now, laced with exhaustion. I thought we were working towards something solid. But this feels like a setback. It is, she admitted, wiping her tears. I messed up. I should have shut it down the moment he reached out. I was foolish to think it wouldn't affect us. Foolish doesn't even begin to cover it, I said, feeling a mixture of anger and despair. I can't keep fighting for us if you're still holding on to the past. I promise I'll end it, she said, her voice desperate. I'll block him, I'll do whatever it takes. But please don't give up on me. I love you, Brian. I want this to work. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. I need time to think, I replied, feeling my heart heavy with doubt. I don't know if I can trust you right now. As the days passed, I felt a storm brewing inside me. I tried to act normal, to maintain our routine, but the tension was palpable. I found myself questioning every interaction, every moment we shared. Had I been blind to the signs? Was she really committed to me, or was this just another chapter in a long saga of betrayal? We resumed our therapy sessions, but the atmosphere was charged with unresolved emotions. During one session, Dr. Miller noticed the tension between us. It seems like there's something deeper going on, she said gently. Can you both share what you've been feeling? Jennifer hesitated, then took a deep breath. I've been struggling with my feelings about Luke reaching out again. I thought I could manage it, but it just brought back a flood of memories, and I didn't handle it well. Brian, what about you? Dr. Miller prompted. I felt the weight of their gazes on me, and I could feel my heart pounding. I'm just confused. I thought we were moving forward, but now it feels like we're backtracking. How can I trust her if she's still communicating with him? Dr. Miller nodded, her expression understanding. It's normal to feel this way after a betrayal. Trust is fragile and can easily be shaken. What does trust look like for you right now, Brian? I need to know she's fully committed to me. Without any lingering ties to the past, I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. I need to feel secure in this relationship. Jennifer nodded, tears in her eyes. I understand that, and I want to prove it to you. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. As we continued to talk through our feelings, I realized that the path to healing was not linear. There would be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But the important thing was that we were still committed to working through it together. After the session ended, we walked out into the bustling street, the noise of the city surrounding us. I could feel the weight of our conversation hanging in the air. Can we start over? Jennifer asked softly. I want to rebuild our trust from the ground up. No more secrets, no more distractions. I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. I want that too, but it's going to take time. I can't promise that it'll be easy. I know, she said, her voice filled with determination. But I'm willing to fight for us. Just give me a chance to prove it. As we walked side by side, I felt a mix of hope and uncertainty. The road ahead would still be challenging, but perhaps we could find a way through the darkness together, one step at a time. The following weeks were a test of our resolve. Jennifer was committed to rebuilding our trust, and I could see her effort in our day-to-day interactions. She was transparent about her feelings and made a conscious effort to prioritize our relationship. Yet, despite her best intentions, I often felt a gnawing anxiety, an undercurrent of fear that threatened to unravel everything we were working toward. One afternoon, I came home from work early, eager to surprise Jennifer with dinner. As I entered the apartment, I noticed her sitting at the kitchen table, a notebook open in front of her, her pen moving quickly across the page. It seemed innocuous enough, but something about her expression felt off. "Hey, you're home early," she said, looking up with a forced smile. "What a nice surprise." "Hey," I replied, trying to gauge her mood. "What are you working on?" "Oh, just some thoughts I had about our relationship. Things I want to share in therapy," she said, her voice a little too light. "It's nothing serious." I felt a flicker of unease. "Are you sure? You seem a bit distracted." "I'm fine, really," she insisted, but I could sense a wall between us. I decided to let it go for now and focused on preparing dinner. As we sat down to eat, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. "So, any plans for the weekend?" I asked, trying to engage her in light conversation. She hesitated before answering. "I thought we could relax, maybe go for a hike?" "Sounds great," I replied, though my mind was still churning with uncertainty. "I've been thinking a lot about our last session. It's going to take time, but I want us to keep moving forward." Jennifer nodded, her expression growing serious. "I agree. I know I messed up with Luke, and I'm determined to show you that I'm fully committed to you." But as the weekend approached, I noticed her mood darkening. She seemed preoccupied, often lost in thought, and I couldn't help but worry that she was spiraling again. On Saturday morning, I suggested we go hiking, hoping the fresh air would clear our heads. As we walked along the trail, I tried to engage her in conversation. "Look at how beautiful the leaves are," I said, pointing to the vibrant colors surrounding us. "It's amazing how nature changes." "Yeah," she replied absently, her eyes fixed on the ground ahead. I felt a twinge of frustration. "Jennifer, are you really here with me right now?" She paused, looking at me with a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you seem distant. I thought this hike would help us reconnect, but it feels like you're miles away," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm sorry, Brian. It's just, there's a lot on my mind." Quote dot. "Like what?" I pressed gently, sensing that this was a critical moment for us. "I don't know how to explain it," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I keep feeling this pressure to prove myself to you, to make up for what happened with Luke, and it's overwhelming." "Pressure? You don't need to feel that way," I replied, my heart aching for her. "I want us to work together, but I can't help if you're not open with me about what you're feeling." "I know," she said, tears pooling in her eyes. "I just want to be the person you deserve, and I'm scared I'm failing." The tension between us was palpable. "You're not failing," I reassured her. "But we need to communicate better. You can't carry this weight alone." She nodded, wiping her tears. "You're right. I just wish I could shake off this anxiety." As we continued our hike, I tried to stay connected to her, offering small gestures of support, but the unease lingered. That night, as we settled on the couch to watch a movie, I noticed Jennifer scrolling through her phone. Her brow furrowed. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just checking messages," she replied, her voice slightly defensive. "Messages from who?" I probed, my unease resurfacing. "Just friends," she said quickly, her eyes darting away from me. I felt a familiar knot in my stomach. "Is it Luke?" "No, it's not," she said, clearly agitated. "I promise." But the doubt crept back in, and I could feel the frustration boiling beneath my surface. "It's just hard to believe anything you say right now. Jen, you keep saying you're committed to me, but it feels like you're still caught up in the past." She turned to me, her expression fierce. "I'm trying. I'm here, aren't I? I'm trying to make this work. But you have to trust me, too." "Trust is earned," I said, feeling my heart race. "And right now, I feel like I'm losing you all over again." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, we both sat in silence, the weight of our emotions hanging heavy in the air. Then, without warning, Jennifer burst into tears. I can't keep doing this, she cried, her voice breaking. I feel like I'm on a tightrope, and I'm terrified of falling. I reached out to her, pulling her into my arms. You're not alone in this, Jen. I'm here. We're in this together, remember? As I held her, I realized that we were at a breaking point. A moment that could either shatter us or bring us closer together. It was a test of our commitment, and while the fear was palpable, I also felt a flicker of hope. We need to be honest with each other. I whispered, my heart aching for her. Let's lay everything out on the table. No more secrets, no more fears. Jennifer nodded against my shoulder, her breath shaky. I'm scared, Brian. Scared of losing you, scared of not being enough. I'm scared too, I admitted. But I believe we can work through this if we're willing to face it together. In that moment, as we clung to each other, I felt a shift. It was a recognition that while the road ahead would be filled with challenges, it was also a path we could navigate together. It was a choice to confront our fears, to rebuild our trust, and to choose love despite the uncertainties that loomed ahead. As the night wore on, we talked openly, sharing our fears and hopes in a way we hadn't done before. And in that honesty, I felt a sense of renewal, a promise that we would fight for each other, no matter how difficult the journey became. After our emotional breakthrough, things began to shift. Jennifer and I made a conscious effort to be more transparent with each other. To lay our fears and anxieties bare. The conversations that followed were difficult but cathartic, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. We decided to take a weekend trip to the coast, a chance to escape the city and reconnect in a beautiful, serene setting. As we drove along the winding coastal road, the salty air filled our lungs, and the crashing waves provided a rhythmic backdrop to our journey. I can't wait to see the ocean, Jennifer said, her face lighting up with excitement. It's been ages since we've done something like this. Yeah, it feels like the perfect way to recharge, I replied, feeling the tension from the city slip away with each mile we traveled. When we finally arrived, the sight of the ocean was breathtaking. The sun cast a golden hue over the water, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore instantly calmed my racing heart. As we unloaded the car, I could see the weight of the world lifting from Jennifer's shoulders. We spent our first evening walking along the beach, our toes sinking into the warm sand. I took her hand, and as we walked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of tranquility enveloping us. We laughed, shared stories, and for the first time in a while, I felt the spark of our connection reigniting. That night, we sat on the balcony of our cozy rental, sipping wine and watching the stars twinkle above us. I turned to her, feeling a swell of affection. I'm really glad we decided to come here, I said softly. Me too, she replied, her eyes sparkling in the moonlight. It feels like we're starting over. As we talked late into the night, I felt a sense of camaraderie that I hadn't experienced in a long time. We shared dreams and fears, discussing everything from our future plans to our favorite childhood memories. Each revelation felt like a thread weaving us closer together. The next morning, we woke up early to watch the sunrise. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, and as the sun broke over the horizon, I felt a sense of renewal wash over me. We stood hand in hand, soaking in the beauty of the moment. Just like that sunrise, we can have our own fresh start, I said, looking into her eyes. We can leave the past behind and focus on what's ahead. Jennifer smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I want that more than anything. Our days at the beach were filled with laughter and adventure. We explored quaint seaside shops, indulged in fresh seafood, and even took a sunset kayak tour. As we paddled through the calm waters, the world around us felt magical. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so at ease. But even amidst the joy, I was aware of the fragility of our situation. I knew that old habits could creep back in, that doubts and fears could resurface if we weren't vigilant. I made a conscious effort to keep the lines of communication open, asking her how she felt and sharing my own thoughts. On our last evening, we sat by a bonfire on the beach, the flames dancing in the night sky. As we roasted marshmallows, I turned to her, feeling the warmth of the fire mirrored in my chest. I want us to keep this momentum going when we go back home. I do too, Jennifer said, her expression earnest. We need to keep talking, keep being honest about how we're feeling. I don't want to slip back into old patterns. I nodded, appreciating her commitment. We can make a plan. Maybe we can set aside time each week to check in with each other, just to talk about how we're doing. Absolutely, she agreed. And if I ever feel overwhelmed or anxious, I'll promise to communicate that with you. No more hiding. Deal, I said, feeling a sense of relief. We spent the rest of the evening discussing our future, where we wanted to travel next, goals we wanted to achieve together, and dreams that had been put on hold. As the fire crackled and the waves lapped at the shore, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This trip had reignited our connection and provided a much-needed reset. But as we packed up the next morning and headed back to the city, I couldn't shake the lingering worries. Would we really be able to maintain this newfound honesty? Would we fall back into old habits once the pressures of daily life returned? When we arrived home, the familiar hustle and bustle of the city felt overwhelming. I could sense the weight of our previous issues hovering in the background. As the days turned into weeks, I made a conscious effort to keep our promise. We set aside our check-in time each week, and it became a grounding force in our relationship. But as the days passed, I found myself feeling an underlying tension again. Jennifer seemed to be slipping back into her old patterns, distracted and distant at times. I knew she was still grappling with her feelings about Luke, and despite her promises, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more she wasn't sharing. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at work, I returned home to find her sitting at the table, her notebook open in front of her again. My heart sank. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I'm just writing some thoughts," she replied quickly, not meeting my eyes. "Can we talk?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Sure," she said hesitantly, putting her pen down. I took a deep breath, trying to navigate the fragile space between us. "I've noticed you've been a bit distant again. Is everything okay?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm just feeling overwhelmed, Brian. Work has been stressful, and I'm trying to keep everything together." "But are you also feeling overwhelmed about us?" I pressed gently, sensing that we were at another critical juncture. I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I want to make this work, but sometimes I feel like I'm not enough for you." "You are enough," I said firmly, moving closer to her. "But we need to be honest with each other. If something is bothering you, let's talk about it instead of letting it fester." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm scared of falling back into the same patterns. Of hurting you again. I don't want to be that person." "I don't want that either," I said, my heart aching for her. "But we can't fix things if we don't communicate. Let's figure this out together." In that moment, I realized that while we had made progress, the journey was far from over. We were still learning how to navigate our emotions, how to be vulnerable with one another. The weight of our past was still present, but we had a choice, to confront it together or let it pull us apart. As we sat together, tears and uncertainty spilling over, I felt a renewed determination. We would face our fears head-on, together. The path would be challenging, but I knew that as long as we were willing to fight for each other, we had a chance at a brighter future. In the days that followed our emotional conversation, I felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Jennifer and I had made a commitment to honesty, but I sensed that we were still teetering on the edge of vulnerability. Our weekly check-ins became our anchor, but I could feel the weight of unspoken fears lingering in the air. One evening, as we sat down for our scheduled check-in, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. "I think we need to address the elephant in the room," I said, my voice steady but firm. Jennifer looked at me, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "What do you mean?" "I think we need to talk about Luke," I said, watching her reaction closely. "I know it's a sensitive subject, but we can't keep skirting around it. It's affecting us, whether we acknowledge it or not." She sighed, her eyes drifting to the floor. "I guess I've been avoiding it because I don't want to hurt you again. I'm scared of how you'll react." "I'm not here to blame you," I said gently. "I just want to understand how you're feeling. It's important for us to clear the air." After a long pause, Jennifer nodded, her expression softening. "You're right. I still have unresolved feelings about everything that happened with him. It's like a shadow that follows me. And I don't want it to come between us." "Then let's confront that shadow together," I encouraged. "What do you feel when you think about him?" "I feel guilt," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Guilt for hurting you. Guilt for letting him into my life in the first place. But there's also confusion about what I wanted from him and why I let it go that far." "That makes sense," I replied, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. "It's a complicated mix of emotions. But I need you to be honest with me. Do you still have feelings for him?" Jennifer hesitated, biting her lip as she gathered her thoughts. "I don't know. I think I had a fantasy about what our relationship could have been, but the reality is that I love you. You're my partner, and I want to build a future with you." Hearing her say that filled me with relief, but there was still a nagging doubt. "So, if you're saying you love me, why is this still weighing on you?" "Because I'm scared," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "Scared of making the same mistakes. I don't want to hurt you again. I keep replaying our past, and it terrifies me." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "You don't have to carry that fear alone. I'm here, and we're in this together. But we need to actively work on it. Can we agree to talk about it when it comes up instead of letting it simmer?" Jennifer nodded, her grip tightening around my hand. "I'd like that. I want to be open with you, even when it's hard." As we continued our conversation, I felt the tension slowly dissipating. It was liberating to finally address the past instead of letting it loom over us. We made a plan to face any feelings or doubts as they arose, promising to keep the lines of communication open. The following week was filled with ups and downs. I noticed Jennifer was trying harder to engage with me, but I could also see her battling internal demons. One evening, she came home looking particularly frazzled, her face pale and drawn. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, my heart racing as I took in her demeanor. She sighed heavily, collapsing onto the couch. "I just had a really tough day at work, and I feel so overwhelmed." "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked, moving closer to her. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, looking down. "It's just, everything feels heavy right now, and I'm worried I'm going to slip back into those old habits of shutting down." I felt a pang of concern. "You know you can tell me anything, right? I'm here to support you." "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "But part of me is still scared. Scared of being vulnerable, scared of feeling like I'm failing you again." "Vulnerability is part of this journey, Jen," I said gently. "You don't have to have it all together all the time. It's okay to feel overwhelmed." With that, I reached out, pulling her close to me. "Let's take a moment. Just breathe together. We'll get through this, one step at a time." We sat together in silence for a few moments, the weight of our worries hanging in the air. But I felt a flicker of warmth between us. I knew that if we could just be present with each other, we could weather any storm. As the days turned into weeks, Jennifer continued to grapple with her emotions. We maintained our check-ins, but I could tell there were still things left unsaid. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, I caught her staring out the window, her expression distant. "What's on your mind?" I asked, approaching her slowly. "Just thinking about how everything has changed," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a fog. I want to be fully present, but it's hard." "Let's talk about it," I urged gently. "What specifically feels foggy?" "I think about the past with Luke and how it still lingers in my mind. I don't want to keep comparing our relationship to that," she confessed, her voice cracking. "Comparison is a trap," I said, feeling a surge of empathy. "You're not the same person you were then, and neither am I. We've grown together. And our relationship is different, stronger, in many ways." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "But it's a struggle. I want to let go of that chapter, but sometimes I don't know how." "Let's face it together," I encouraged. "We can create new memories to overshadow the old ones. What if we planned something special? A weekend getaway, just the two of us?" Her eyes lit up at the suggestion. "I'd love that. A chance to make new memories sounds perfect." "Then let's do it. We'll find a place where we can focus on each other, no distractions. Just us." We began planning our trip, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As we mapped out our getaway, I could feel the fog lifting. Jennifer seemed more present, more engaged, and I couldn't help but feel optimistic about what lay ahead. The day of our trip finally arrived, and as we set off, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling within me. We were heading to a cozy cabin in the mountains, surrounded by nature and tranquility, exactly what we needed to reconnect. As we drove through winding roads, the scenery shifted from the hustle and bustle of the city to lush greenery and towering trees. The fresh air felt invigorating, and I could sense Jennifer's tension slowly dissipating. When we arrived at the cabin, it exceeded my expectations. Nestled in a quiet clearing, it felt like a sanctuary. We unpacked our bags and settled in, taking a moment to appreciate the beauty around us. "Let's go for a hike," I suggested, feeling energized by the surrounding nature. "Great idea," Jennifer replied, her smile genuine and bright. As we walked along the trails, the peace of the mountains enveloped us. We shared stories, laughter, and even moments of silence, simply enjoying each other's company. For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of our past lifting, replaced by the joy of being present with one another. That evening, as we sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa, I turned to her. "I'm really glad we did this. It feels like we're finally making progress." "Me too," she said softly. "This is exactly what I needed. A chance to breathe and reconnect. Just remember, whenever the fog starts creeping back in, we can face it together," I reassured her. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled outside, I felt a profound sense of hope. While we had faced many challenges, I knew we were building something beautiful. This trip was a reminder that love could thrive even in the midst of uncertainty. And as long as we faced the past together, we had the strength to create a brighter future. Our time in the mountains was a welcome respite from the complexities of our lives, but as we prepared to return home, I felt a twinge of anxiety creeping back in. We had made so much progress, but I knew that the real test would come when we faced our everyday realities again. On the drive back, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. Jennifer seemed lighter, more at ease, and I felt a renewed sense of hope for our future. We discussed our plans for the week ahead, including a dinner with friends and a concert we'd been looking forward to. It felt good to be excited about what was to come. As the days passed, we settled back into our routine. We made a conscious effort to prioritize our check-ins and keep the lines of communication open. But just as I began to feel confident in our progress, life threw us a curveball. It was a Friday evening, and we were getting ready for the dinner party. I was in the living room, adjusting my tie when Jennifer walked in, looking stunning in a fitted dress. Her hair fell perfectly around her shoulders. And for a moment, I was taken aback by how beautiful she looked. "Wow, you look amazing," I said, my heart swelling with admiration. "Thanks. You don't look so bad yourself," she replied, grinning as she straightened my collar. As we arrived at the restaurant, I could feel the buzz of excitement in the air. Friends greeted us with hugs, and laughter filled the space as we settled in at our table. The night unfolded beautifully, with delicious food and engaging conversations. But then, just as I was starting to relax, I saw him, Luke, across the room. My stomach twisted into knots. I hadn't expected to see him, and my heart raced as memories flooded back. I glanced at Jennifer, who seemed to have noticed him too. Her expression shifted, and I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Are you okay?" I whispered, leaning closer to her. She nodded, but I could tell she was holding her breath. "I'm fine, just surprised." The evening continued, but my mind was in turmoil. I tried to engage in conversations, but my focus was constantly drawn back to Luke. I watched as he interacted with our friends, laughing and enjoying himself, and I felt an urge to confront the situation head-on. "Let's go say hi," I said, surprising even myself with my boldness. Jennifer hesitated, her eyes widening. "Are you sure? I don't want it to be awkward. We can't let him dictate our evening. We're here to have fun, and I'd rather face this head-on," I insisted. With a deep breath, we made our way over to him. As we approached, I felt Jennifer tense beside me. Luke looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to a knowing smile. "Brian, Jennifer, fancy seeing you here," he said, his tone casual yet laced with an undercurrent of tension. "Yeah, well, we're just here for a fun night out," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Jennifer smiled politely, though I could see the discomfort in her eyes. "It's a nice place." Luke nodded, glancing between us. "Glad to see you both. How have you been?" "Doing well, thanks," I said, keeping my voice steady. "How about you?" "Pretty good. Just working on a new project," he replied, a hint of pride in his voice. As we chatted, I couldn't shake the feeling of being on high alert. I could sense Jennifer's discomfort, and I wanted to protect her from whatever emotions this encounter might stir. After a few awkward moments, I decided to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Well, we should get back to our friends," I said, giving Jennifer a gentle nudge. "Definitely," she agreed, relief evident in her voice. As we walked away, I felt the weight of the encounter pressing down on us. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly, glancing at her. "I didn't expect to see him tonight," she replied, her voice shaky. "It brought back a lot of feelings." "I know," I said softly. "But you handled it well. We can talk about it later if you want." "Yeah, I'd like that," she said, taking a deep breath. The rest of the evening was a blur of laughter and conversations. but I couldn't shake the tension that had settled between us. I was determined to check in with Jennifer later, to ensure we addressed the emotions that had surfaced. Once we got home, I turned to her, my heart heavy with concern. "Let's talk about what happened with Luke." Jennifer nodded, her expression thoughtful. I felt a mix of emotions. Seeing him made me remember the mistakes I made, and it brought back a lot of anxiety. "I understand," I said, moving closer to her. "But remember what we talked about? Facing those feelings together?" "Yeah, I just didn't want to feel like I was dragging us back into old wounds," she admitted, her voice soft. "You're not dragging us back. We're growing from this. Let's use this as an opportunity to strengthen our bond," I encouraged, trying to maintain a sense of calm. After a long pause, she looked up at me, her eyes glistening. "You're right. I don't want to hide from my feelings anymore. I want to be honest with you." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of relief. "Let's unpack it. What were you feeling when you saw him?" "I felt guilt, anger, and a bit of nostalgia," she said, her voice trembling. "It reminded me of the turmoil I put us through, and I hate that I still feel that way sometimes." "It's okay to feel that way," I reassured her. "But we've made so much progress. You're not that person anymore, and neither am I." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know, but it's hard to reconcile those feelings. I want to be able to move on, but seeing him brought it all back." "Then let's talk about it whenever it comes up. We'll work through it together, one step at a time," I said, taking her hands in mine. "You don't have to face this alone." As we continued to talk, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We were facing the past head on, and while it was painful, it also felt liberating. We were not defined by our mistakes, we were defined by how we chose to move forward. In that moment, I realized that love was not just about the good times. It was about standing together in the face of adversity, confronting our fears, and growing stronger because of it. And as long as we were committed to facing the challenges together, I knew we would emerge from this stronger than ever. The following week, life returned to its usual pace. The encounter with Luke lingered in our minds, but we both made a conscious effort to focus on our relationship and the progress we had made. Our weekly check-ins became a safe space for us to unpack any lingering emotions and fears. I felt hopeful, but the tension from our recent brush with the past still simmered beneath the surface. One evening, as we sat on the couch with a movie playing in the background, Jennifer turned to me, her expression serious. "Can we talk about what happened with Luke again?" "Of course," I said, pausing the movie. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about it a lot," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I know I've said this before, but I still feel guilty about what happened between us. It feels like a shadow that keeps hanging over us." I took a deep breath, wanting to reassure her. "You don't need to keep carrying that weight. We're not defined by our past mistakes. We've both worked hard to move forward." "I know, but sometimes I wonder if I really deserve this second chance," she said, her eyes searching mine for understanding. "Jennifer, you deserve every bit of happiness," I said firmly. "We both do. We're rebuilding our relationship together, and that's what matters most." She nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. "What if I can't fully let go? What if this keeps haunting me?" "It might take time," I said gently. "But that's okay. It's a process. We can keep working through these feelings as they come up." "I want to be completely open with you," she said, her voice stronger now. "But I also want to ensure we don't fall back into old patterns. I want to be the partner you deserve." "You're already that partner," I replied, moving closer to her. "You're here, you're trying, and that means the world to me." After a moment of silence, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think it would help if I could confront Luke directly. I need to close that chapter for good." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach at her suggestion. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Confronting him could stir up more emotions. "I know it might be messy," she said, her determination clear. "But I need to do it for myself. I want to take control of my feelings instead of letting them control me." I admired her courage, but a part of me worried about what this confrontation might unleash. "If you're certain, then I'll support you. But let's make a plan. We can do this together." She smiled, a spark of relief in her eyes. "Thank you. I appreciate your support more than you know." We spent the next few days planning her approach, discussing what she wanted to say and how she hoped to navigate the conversation. I encouraged her to be honest and assertive, reminding her that she had the power to shape this experience. Finally, the day arrived. Jennifer had decided to meet Luke at a coffee shop, a neutral location where they could talk without distractions. As she prepared, I could see the nervous energy radiating from her. "You've got this," I said, giving her a reassuring smile. "Just remember to stay true to yourself." "Thanks, Brian," she said, taking a deep breath. "I'm nervous, but I feel ready." As she left, I felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. I wanted her to find closure, but I also worried about how this might affect her. I spent the time she was gone pacing around the apartment, my mind racing with possibilities. When Jennifer finally returned, I could see the weight had lifted from her shoulders. She looked different, almost radiant. I rushed to her, concern flooding my senses. "How did it go?" She took a deep breath, a smile breaking across her face. "It went really well, actually." I told him everything I wanted to say. My heart raced as I listened intently. "What happened?" I started by acknowledging the past and how it impacted us. She explained, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I told him I needed to take responsibility for my actions and the hurt I caused. "That sounds empowering," I said, feeling a swell of admiration for her courage. "It was," she continued. "He was respectful and listened, but I could see that he still had feelings. He tried to bring up old memories, but I stayed focused on why I needed to do this." "I'm so proud of you," I said, wrapping my arms around her. "It takes a lot of strength to confront your past." "Thank you," she said, returning my embrace. But the most important part was when I told him I was moving on. That I was committed to you and to our future. I pulled back, looking into her eyes. "And how did he react?" "He took it well," she said, her expression serious but relieved. "I think he understood. It felt like I finally closed that chapter of my life. I feel free." "That's amazing, Jen," I said, my heart swelling with pride. "You did it. You faced your fears and took control of your narrative." As we settled into the couch together, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. This moment felt significant, a turning point in our journey. We were no longer tethered to the past, we were forging a new path together. But as the evening wore on, I also realized that while we had taken a huge step forward, there were still hurdles to overcome. I could sense that Jennifer was still processing her emotions, and I wanted to ensure she felt fully supported. "Is there anything else you want to talk about?" I asked, my voice gentle. She paused, contemplating. "I think I still need to work through some of the guilt I feel. Just because I confronted him doesn't mean those feelings have disappeared completely." "That's perfectly normal," I reassured her. "Healing is a journey, and it doesn't happen overnight. Just remember, you don't have to do it alone." "Thank you for being so patient with me," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I know this hasn't been easy for either of us." "It hasn't," I agreed. "But it's worth it. I believe in us." As we cuddled on the couch, I realized that while our journey was far from over, we had made significant strides toward healing and rebuilding our relationship. We were no longer just two people trying to navigate their past, we were partners, facing the future together. And as long as we kept communicating, facing our fears, and supporting one another, I knew we would find our way through anything that came our way. Together, we were stronger, and I was ready for whatever the future held. The days following Jennifer's confrontation with Luke felt like a fresh start. There was an unmistakable lightness in our home, and we both seemed more attuned to each other's needs. Our conversations deepened, and it felt as if we were rediscovering each other in a new light. But amidst the optimism, I sensed an undercurrent of unresolved feelings in Jennifer, and I was determined to help her navigate through them. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, I noticed she was quiet. Lost in thought, I glanced over, stirring the pasta while watching her chop vegetables. "Hey, what's on your mind?" I asked, hoping to draw her out of her reverie. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," she replied, her voice thoughtful. "About us and where we're headed." "Good thoughts, I hope?" I said, trying to keep the mood light. "Mostly good," she admitted, a hint of hesitation in her tone. "But some are still heavy. I want to be fully committed, but there are still threads from the past that sometimes unravel in my mind." I turned off the stove and faced her, giving her my full attention. "What threads are you talking about?" "I guess it's the lingering doubts," she said, looking down at the cutting board. "Even after everything, I still sometimes feel unworthy of what we have. Like I'm not fully deserving of this second chance." "Jennifer, you've worked so hard to confront your past," I said gently. "You're not defined by your mistakes. You've shown so much strength and commitment." "I know, but sometimes it feels like I'm just waiting for something to go wrong." she confessed, like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Let's face those fears together, I said, moving closer to her. What can we do to ease that worry? How can I support you? She sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. I think I need to be more proactive about addressing these feelings. Instead of letting them simmer, I want to openly discuss them when they arise. That sounds like a great plan, I said, encouraging her. And I'm here for every step of the way. You can share anything with me, no matter how small it seems. As we finished dinner and sat down to eat, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. We laughed about silly moments from our past, reminiscing about shared experiences that brought us joy. Yet, I could still sense that deep, introspective side of Jennifer lurking just beneath the surface. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to surprise her with breakfast in bed. I quietly moved around the kitchen, making pancakes and brewing coffee. As I worked, I thought about how to encourage her to continue opening up, to help her feel secure in our relationship. When Jennifer finally stirred awake, I brought her breakfast, setting it down on the nightstand with a flourish. Good morning, beautiful. She sat up, her eyes widening in surprise. Wow, this is amazing. You're the best. Just trying to brighten your day, I said, grinning. But I also want to talk about something important. Her expression shifted slightly, curiosity mingling with apprehension. Okay, what is it? I've been thinking about our future, what it looks like and how we can continue to grow together, I said, gauging her reaction. I want us to be a team, fully committed to each other. I like the sound of that, she replied, her smile genuine. What do you have in mind? Well, I thought we could start by discussing our individual goals and dreams, I suggested. Not just as a couple, but also as individuals. That way, we can support each other in achieving them. Quote. Jennifer's expression brightened. That's a great idea. I've been wanting to revisit some of my own aspirations. Perfect, I said, my excitement growing. Let's set aside some time this week to really dive into it. As the day went on, we made plans to dedicate an evening to our discussions. I could feel a renewed sense of purpose, and it seemed like Jennifer felt it too. We spent the day enjoying each other's company, but the thought of our upcoming conversation lingered in the back of my mind. When the evening arrived, we settled into the living room, ready to share our thoughts and dreams. I could see the anticipation in Jennifer's eyes, and I knew this would be a pivotal moment for us. Okay, I'll go first, I said, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. One of my biggest dreams has always been to write a book. I've had ideas swirling around in my head for years, but I've never taken the leap to actually start writing. Jennifer's eyes lit up. That's amazing. You've always been such a good storyteller. I think you should go for it. I smiled at her encouragement. Thank you. I've been hesitant because I'm afraid of failing. But I want to make it a priority. That's a great goal, and I'm here to support you, she said sincerely. I can help you set aside time each week to write. I nodded, grateful for her support. And what about you? What are your aspirations? Jennifer took a deep breath, her expression shifting to one of contemplation. I've always wanted to explore more in my career. I love what I do, but I feel like I've been playing it safe. I want to challenge myself more, maybe even consider further education or training. That sounds exciting, I said, my enthusiasm building. What kind of training are you thinking about? I've been considering a leadership program, she said, her confidence growing. I want to develop my skills and be in a position where I can make a difference. That's fantastic, Jen. You'd be amazing in a leadership role, I said, smiling at her. What's holding you back from pursuing it? She paused, her expression shifting to uncertainty. I think part of me still doubts if I can handle the pressure. What if I'm not cut out for it? Those doubts are normal, I reassured her. But remember, you've already faced so much. You have the strength to tackle this, and I'll be right by your side. As we continued to share our goals, I could see the spark in Jennifer's eyes growing brighter. We were no longer just discussing aspirations. We were building a vision for our future together. We talked late into the night, mapping out our dreams and encouraging one another to pursue them unapologetically. When the conversation finally wound down, I felt a profound sense of connection with her. This was exactly what we needed, I said, taking her hand. We're not just partners, we're each other's biggest supporters. Absolutely, she agreed, her smile radiant. I feel lighter just talking about it. It's nice to know we're in this together. Quote. As we settled into bed that night, I reflected on how far we had come. We had faced the ghosts of our past and emerged stronger, but this new phase felt just as significant. We were building a foundation for our future, one based on honesty, support, and mutual growth. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a renewed sense of hope for what lay ahead. Together, we were ready to face any challenges that came our way, knowing that our love would guide us through. The weeks following our deep conversations were filled with excitement and new energy. Jennifer and I made a concerted effort to support each other's goals, but I sensed some tension building beneath the surface. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, I decided to address my concerns. "Jen, you've seemed a bit distant lately. Is everything okay? I've been grappling with the idea of trust, trusting myself and trusting that I can be the partner you deserve," she admitted. "Those doubts are normal," I reassured her. "But remember, we're building this together. Let's set aside time each week to talk about how we're feeling." She nodded, a grateful smile on her face. "I'd like that. It would help me feel less alone." That week, we had our first check-in, creating a cozy atmosphere in the living room. "What's been bothering you?" I asked. "I keep thinking about how I hurt you in the past," she said, her voice shaky. "I worry that it'll always linger in your mind. While the past has shaped us, it doesn't have to define our future," I replied. "You've shown so much strength." We continued our conversation, addressing our fears and dreams openly. As it wound down, Jennifer suggested we try something new together. "Let's take a dance class. It'll challenge us both." I felt a flutter of excitement. "That sounds like a great idea." On the night of our first class, I was a bundle of nerves. But as we joined the energetic salsa class, I felt the rhythm take hold. We stumbled through the steps, but laughter filled the air, and I sensed the tension fading. As the class ended, I grinned at Jennifer. "I can't believe we did it. See? I told you it would be fun," she said, her smile infectious. That night, as we cuddled on the couch, I felt a deeper closeness. We had faced our fears together, building trust and connection. I realized we were not just working through the past, we were actively creating a future together.